Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Aitoro with Cyber Risk Alliance and SC Media, and I am so pleased to be a part of today's conversation where we're going to focus on the frankly rather momentous challenge of securing the supply chain in government. I'm joined today by Bob Martin. He is Senior Principal Engineer at the Mitre Corporation and has dedicated many years of his career to solving some of the world's most difficult problems in systems and software engineering. And also joined by Chris Wysopal. He is co-founder and CTO of Veracode. First of all, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
I want to make a quick throw to the event that you all hosted. We partnered with you on, gosh, I guess it's been probably a couple weeks ago or so now. That was called the Build Summit, and it is available on demand. We really dug into the topics for that. I thought it ended up really a terrific event. So I encourage folks to go take a look at that. You can see the sessions on demand. It's available at the government executive website. So if you go to govexec.com, you should be able to access all of those. But we did want to talk about it after the fact and dig in a little more. So that's what we're here to do. I thought to start out, we could do a little bit of a level set, by looking a bit backwards. It actually feels like this came out quite a ways ago, but part of Biden's executive order included a requirement to only purchase software that is developed securely. And it did direct NIST to issue guidance, identifying some practices to enhance the security of software supply chain. So that was then from NIST came out in February. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. A lot of that to me is a look forward effort in terms of how to do things better, but agencies are also trying to look currently at the state of security in their supply chain now. So talk to me about those NIST guidelines, how important they are, and maybe where agencies are from your perspective in this effort. And I'll throw it out to either one of you. Perhaps Bob, why don't you kick it off?
Sure, I can start off. So the actual work that came out in February is a revision of efforts that have been going on for a couple of years on a secure software development framework. And that framework reflects a mapping to many existing consensus standards efforts. And so while it's new, it's really something that's been maturing and developing for quite a while. And so you would actually see more progress to people being able to say, yes, I'm following this, I'm adhering to it. In fact, I would offer that hitting the bar for that document is actually insufficient for industry. They actually want more detail from their supply chain partners. They want more specifics. And so there are efforts in industry, in IETF, in Linux Foundation, to actually have a much more substantial way of sharing, collecting, and validating supply chain software security, and actually supply chain security in general, through claims, evidence, and distributed confidential ledgers, all the newest type of technology, but done in a way that doesn't take a couple extra power plants to power them.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, and all of this really involves the state of security for the agencies, but also their partners, the companies, the contractors, the vendors. So, from your perspective, how much collaboration is happening as they kind of move along this road?
Yeah, so from the vendor perspective, I should note that Veracode is also a vendor to the federal government. Vendors want like certainty. They want to know like exactly what they need to do. They want to know when they're done. And that was one of the things that I saw come out of the update of the SSDF 1.1 was they came out with a, sort of an appendix, which was how do the different requirements map to the executive order, and map to some of the other documents, like Bob was saying, like minimum requirements for software. And they actually came out with a pretty good checklist, which has about like 25 different items that you can just go through and say, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And it's a lot easier to consume than reading the whole SSDF document and then trying to figure out what you need to do. It's like, this is what you need to do. Now go look at this chapter, or go look at this section. So I think the practicality of it is something that software suppliers need. Vendors want that practicality. And I started, once that came out, I started hearing from my customers. They're saying, can you help me meet this requirement? I think Veracode can help meet this requirement. And the conversations just became much more like, we can actually do this, we can get this done. So I really like the practicality that's come out of, sort of the forcing function of the executive order, where there's been real, like Bob said, there's been a lot of good work done over the years, but it's a little easier to consume now, I think, because it's now a requirement to do business. And I think that's going to ripple out. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's going to ripple outside of the government too. It's like, well, if you're selling to the government, you're doing it. Well, I'm a bank, you should be doing it for me too. And that's one of the nice things I see coming out of this process.
On top of that, Chris, some of these activities actually will make industry supply chains more efficient for each of them, for each player, whether they're the supplier or the one consuming someone else's. And, one of the other things that has been forced by the executive order is the whole idea of software bill of materials and, getting that into something that I think everybody had some form of a bill of material. It may have been very loose, it may, been notional, but now we're getting to the point where you want it machine consumable, machine producible, because it actually enables so many different things. And I've even heard people talking about hardware bill of materials that are machine readable. And, we each have gotten that IKEA cabinet with all the parts. And, so a bill of materials is not something new, but having them machine readable. I've even been talking to people in machine learning and AI about BOMs for data sets and the pedigree of the data sets and the provenance. And so the concept is really caught on, but the executive order really has pushed it, over the top in urgency and need to come together on it.
Yeah, I think the SBOM is sort of a long time coming, and we've been doing this informally for so long, and it's so inefficient. Like when Log4j came out, I had all of my customers sending me emails saying, please tell me whether you're using the vulnerable version of Log4j or not. Think about how much work that is for like our customer assurance department to respond to all these customers when we could be publishing an SBOM at a URL where they could just go look for themselves. So this is, and what Bob talks about is the automation. Like we've always been worried about what third-party risk is in the software we're buying, and we've asked questions about it. And this just will make it so much more efficient. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about sort of the next step of SBOM, which is making it scalable, making it practical, make it an automated, as opposed to, here's a printout of my bill of materials. So,
which has been a long time challenge of secure. I mean, if you look back to, my goodness, FISMA and so many other security standards in federal government, they were regarded as these checkbox exercises, very manual, paper pushing. So it's been a long time coming in general for there to be some automation that is incorporated into some of these standards. Now, I wouldn't say, I assume you're not saying we're there yet, but we're moving in the direction, right?
We're getting closer. And, the whole idea of transparency of a supply chain is not something unique to software. I mean, think about when you have E. coli breakouts in, vegetables, how does it get to that market? What's the transparency? Where did it come from? They try to get it down to what field so they can understand, okay, just this stuff and the things that flow out of it need to be contained and curtailed. So the idea of understanding the flow of goods so that you can do recalls, so that you can do retrospective things, auditing, all of these things, just software needs to get with the game, like the other industries.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up Log4j, and there was actually, I know one of the great challenges of Log4j, across public and private sector, was the fact that this was often present in systems that simply couldn't necessarily be taken down. It's not like you could say, okay, good, shut that one off, rip it out, and we'll just operate as normal. That really was not necessarily possible in a lot of cases. And a survey just came out very recently from federal managers, IT and program managers, that found, as they are trying to adhere to some of the zero trust mandates, that one of the sticking points is legacy applications, legacy systems, and how you address those and incorporate those into planning. So this is an ongoing problem. Federal government has always struggled with the legacy software and hardware, to be honest. So how do you manage that in an environment that rip and replace might not always be possible?
Well, I think the start is don't keep doing the same thing over again. So, that's why the executive order says, use SaaS and PaaS and cloud services if possible, because it's just so much more efficient from a patching standpoint. You basically tell your vendor, you need to do this for me, and the vendor's going to do it anyway. And it's much more efficient to patch, in one place. So I think, forward looking, they're doing the right thing, as opposed to keep doing the same old thing of trying to manage a lot of black boxes and just custom software. But, you say, the modernization effort is absolutely required. I think, I did some consulting at Microsoft, and one of the things Microsoft determined early on was the security of code was directly proportional to how old it was, right? So if a system was built 20 years ago, it was built with 20-year-old, security knowledge, 20-year-old skills, and it just, you can't just magically put some bubble wrap around it, right? It's going to be fragile. So modernization is one of the key elements of securing government. And just when you modernize, you got to modernize to the right thing. So modernizing to SaaS and PaaS. If it's not, modernizing to, zero trust architectures. And I think they're saying all the right things. It's just, it takes time and money, right? It's difficult.
Well, and you also have a management mindset where, many things are physical goods. You had this, I buy it and I use it until it wears out. And yet today, and maybe for the last couple of decades, more and more of the goods we buy and use are software enabled, networked, and intelligent in some form or manner. And so, it's not just the old IT systems that need to be modernized and managed. It's all of these IoT is, I guess, today's term of art, but they need to be managed and updated, and you need to be aware of what's on them and their position in the vulnerability space. And so that's one of the reasons some of the work in software bills of materials really need to focus on efficiency, so that these kinds of low resource capabilities can actually be part of that effort and be cataloged and managed as well as the bigger enterprise and cloud type environments.
Yeah, and yet you mentioned earlier the potential trickle-down impact, because even with IoT, for example, there's such a struggle in terms of, in healthcare, for example, having some of the devices that are used, the vendor themselves take responsibility to adhere to certain security standards that are required, because they often are not a universal security standard that they're adhering to. And I know healthcare is so behind in terms of having the resources and the teams that are keeping up on the patching and keeping it, it becomes.
Well, and that gets into the fact that sometimes security is not the king.
Yeah.
safety and reliability in these type of systems can be more the focus, but you do need to address the security because that can undermine your reliability and your safety.
Yeah.
So it's a balance.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
brings
I
up-
think
oh,
the whole medical devices and medical environments is sort of the canary in the coal mine for all the problems that we're having, because it is such high risk when a device that fails or isn't available, like patient outcomes are harmed. It really makes a difference, and that's the world we're moving to, right? Like that, the world we're moving to is to have digital infrastructure around physical things.
Yeah.
We see that with self-driving cars and things like that. But the good thing is with the medical device community, they've been on the forefront of arguing that they need the SBOM, right? And that they need good supplier assurance. So there was a lot of learning that has gone into supply chain management and SBOM specifically from the medical community. So yes, even though that they do have low resources, they have good ideas and they need help. And it's just a great example of how government has adopted the learnings of this community.
Well, even there, they have, it's not just whether or not a component is vulnerable. Is it even maintained? Do we have a critical library somewhere where the developer actually, passed away? There's nobody maintaining it.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
visibility into those kinds of issues is a critical thing for any organization that's going to be a viable business.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to, we don't have a lot of time, but there is one question that's kind of big in the news at the moment. I know we've been reporting on the topic and I wanted to get your perspective, but the Department of Justice officially released a policy that is no longer going to prosecute what we might call the white hat hackers, those that are going in to test the various security of systems and networks for the sake of improving and eliminating some of the vulnerabilities. This has been a big topic in the community for a very long time.
Sure.
I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think this is a great step forward. It's not perfect. It's a step in the right direction. I think it goes hand in hand with what government is asking their suppliers to do. They're asking their suppliers to have a vulnerability coordination policy where they will work with researchers that come to them out of the blue with issues in their software. That's actually a requirement of selling software to the federal government in the executive order. The flip side of that is, you have to legally enable people to come to vendors with these issues. So I think this is just a maturation and an acceptance that the vast majority, 99% of this activity is for the common good, and we need to make these safe harbors a little bit wider because there's so much benefit from it. So I'm happy to see this, but the EFF has come out with some critiques about it, and there's still some ways to go, but it's been a long time coming to make any step to help white hat hackers feel safer with what they're doing.
Right. I think you see, parts of the federal government, as Chris said, have been pushing, open the door, let this kind of third party, participate in reviewing your products, giving you feedback. And this is just bringing Department of Justice a little closer to the rest of the federal, thinking about everyone needs to be helping here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. We are pretty much out of time, but I do know you both are going to RSA, which I am too. I'm thrilled to be able to see people in person. I hope I'll be able to see you both. And I think, Bob, you're presenting. Am I right?
Yep. I have a presentation on supply chains, something called Mitre's System of Trust, which is all about how do you get a handle on the risks to the supply chain in a way you can actually manage it. And I also address some of the software supply chain issues. So looking forward to anyone who wants to be there. It's Tuesday afternoon at 1:15, I think.
Great,
Well,
right in the middle of the conference. That's a good,
sounds
a
great,
good time
Bob.
slot. We'll be there. Well, thank you so much. I again want to reiterate to those listening to go check out the event on the government executive website to get more on this topic. And thank you both for joining me today. This was a great conversation.
Yep.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
Jill. Pleasure to be here.
Take care.